Some truths don't shatter your life in a single second. They open quietly, like a forgotten door in a dark attic, and change everything you thought you knew about yourself. Now, you will walk beside a woman who discovers that it is never too late to find out who you truly are. She was already on her knees when the paper slipped from the folder. Dust floated in the narrow beam of light cutting through the attic window. Her black blazer was folded beside her, no longer part of the composed lawyer she had been that morning. The house still smelled faintly of her mother's lavender perfume. And then she saw the word that made her chest tighten: adoption certificate. The letters were clean, official, undeniable. Her name was there, but not the one she had known all her life. There was another name, typed above it, softer somehow. A name that did not belong to any memory she could reach. Her fingers trembled, though she told herself it was only the cold. She had come to the attic to organize documents after the funeral, to be practical, efficient, controlled, just as everyone expected her to be. Instead, she found a question large enough to swallow 51 years. She pressed her lips together and tried to breathe normally. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered into the empty space. Her mother would have told her something this important. Wouldn't she have? She searched the box for explanations, for a letter, for context. There was nothing but silence wrapped in paper. The silence felt louder than grief. Her mother had been gone for 3 days, and now this, a secret hidden beneath tax records and old photographs. Her entire identity suddenly felt like a story told from the outside, and she did not yet know if she wanted to read the rest. On Monday morning, she stood in court as if nothing had changed. Her navy suit was sharp, her hair perfectly pulled back. Her voice carried confidence across the polished wooden room. Jurors nodded as she dismantled the opposing argument. No one could see the fracture running quietly through her. She told herself that facts were facts, and until she verified that document, it meant nothing. She was a lawyer, trained to question evidence, not emotions. A single certificate could not erase decades of belonging. Logic would keep her steady. At lunch, her colleagues laughed about a minor office scandal. She smiled at the right moments, lifting her coffee to her lips. But the taste felt distant, like everything else. She kept hearing that other name in her mind. It echoed softly, like a song she almost remembered. That evening, her husband asked if she was sleeping enough. She shrugged and blamed the funeral arrangements. Her children called to check on her, and she reassured them gently. She did not mention the attic or the paper. Some truths felt too fragile to speak aloud. In the quiet of her bedroom, she opened the folder again. She studied the signatures, the dates, the official seal. There it was, undeniable and calm. She traced the unfamiliar name with her fingertip, and denial began to feel thinner than paper. The bathroom light was unforgiving that night. She leaned closer to the mirror, studying her reflection. Her brown eyes searched for clues in their own depth. Had they always looked this way? Or had she borrowed them from a stranger? She tilted her face, examining the curve of her nose. No one in her family shared that shape. She had noticed it before, but never questioned it deeply. Now every difference felt like evidence. Her own features became unfamiliar territory. Memories began rearranging themselves quietly. Her mother avoiding certain questions about pregnancy stories, the absence of baby pictures before 6 months old, comments from distant relatives that once seemed harmless, pieces that had never quite fit. A strange grief rose inside her chest, not for the parents who raised her, but for the version of herself she thought was complete. If her beginning had been different, what else had she misunderstood? Who was she before she was chosen? She placed her hand against the mirror. The glass was cool and unresponsive. It reflected her image but offered no answers. For the first time in her life, certainty felt like an illusion, and doubt felt painfully alive. Her father had passed 5 years earlier. She drove to the cemetery the next afternoon. The sky above Boston was heavy with gray clouds. She stood before his grave, clutching the document. There were questions she could no longer contain. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered softly. The wind brushed against her coat like a distant reply. She imagined his gentle voice, always calm and measured. He had loved her fiercely, that she never doubted, but love had carried silence. Had they feared she would feel unwanted? Had they thought secrecy would protect her? She tried to see it from their side of the story. Young parents, perhaps advised to keep the truth hidden. A different generation, different rules. Tears came, unexpected and warm. Not from anger alone, but from confusion. She felt guilty for questioning their choices, grateful for the life they gave her, and wounded by the part they withheld. Standing there, she realized something fragile. The conversation she needed would never happen. Some answers were buried deeper than the grave. She would have to search elsewhere now, and that thought both terrified and awakened her. If this story is touching something inside you, take a moment to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious, where are you watching this from? It was past midnight when she opened her laptop. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. She hesitated before typing anything into the search bar. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the point of no return. She entered the name printed above hers on the certificate, slowly, carefully, letter by letter. Then she added the city listed on the document. Her heart began to pound, louder than the ticking clock, and she pressed search. Several results appeared on the screen. Old records, archived announcements, fragments of public data. One entry stood out, dated 51 years ago. It referenced a young woman, admitted to a local hospital. Her breath caught in her throat. This could be nothing, she told herself again, but it could also be everything. She felt fear tightening around her ribs. Not fear of disappointment, but of truth. Truth would demand change. She closed the laptop halfway, then opened it again. Her reflection stared back from the darkened screen. She was no longer just a daughter in mourning. She was a woman standing at the edge of her own origin. And there was no turning back now. She wrote the name on a small piece of paper the next morning. Not her legal name, not the one engraved on diplomas and business cards. The other one, the first one. She stared at it as if it might dissolve under her gaze. But it remained, steady and real. She whispered it once, barely audible. The sound felt foreign in her mouth. It did not carry the weight of childhood memories. It had no echo of school roll calls or birthday cakes. Yet it vibrated somewhere deeper than memory. All day, she kept the folded paper in her coat pocket. Her fingers brushed against it between meetings. It was like carrying a secret pulse beside her heart. She found herself wondering who had chosen that name, and whether it had been spoken with love. On her drive home, she said it again, this time louder, filling the empty car. The syllables felt less sharp, more human. She imagined a young woman holding a newborn. Had that woman whispered this name with hope or with fear? By evening, something subtle had shifted. The name no longer felt like an intrusion. It felt like a doorway left unopened. She was not ready to step through it fully, but she could no longer pretend it wasn't hers. 2 days later, she took the train to the small town listed on the certificate. It was only a couple of hours from Boston, yet it felt distant. Brick buildings replaced glass towers. The air carried the scent of fresh bread and damp earth. Life moved slower there. She walked past a modest hospital that matched the archived record. Its white paint was slightly worn by time. She imagined a young girl arriving there, frightened and alone. The thought tightened something in her chest. That girl had been part of her beginning. At a local cafe, she asked gently about the family name she had found. The waitress paused, recognition flickering across her face. Small towns remember things differently than cities do. Not loudly, but quietly, in stories passed across counters. There was history here. An older man at the corner table leaned in. He mentioned a woman who had left town decades ago. She was young, he said softly. Too young to be carrying that kind of responsibility alone. The words lingered in the air between them. As she stepped back onto the sidewalk, the sky felt wider. This place did not reject her presence. It did not feel hostile or closed. It felt unfinished, and for the first time, her search felt tangible. The name led her to a small bakery at the edge of town. A bell chimed softly as she opened the door. The scent of cinnamon and sugar wrapped around her. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 60s. Her eyes were observant, almost cautious. When she mentioned her birth mother's name, silence followed. The woman's hands stilled over the dough she was shaping. I remember her, she finally said. She was kind, but life wasn't kind back. Compassion softened her voice. They sat at a small wooden table near the window. The bakery was quiet in the afternoon lull. The woman described a young girl with nervous laughter. A girl who worked part-time and avoided questions. A girl who carried something heavy inside her. She loved that baby, the baker added gently. She just didn't know how to keep her. The words did not feel like rejection. They felt like heartbreak, a different kind of loss. Tears blurred her vision, but they were not sharp. They flowed slowly, like thawing ice. For 51 years, she had never known this part. And now, compassion was rewriting her story. Pain was slowly becoming understanding. Back in her hotel room, she sat on the edge of the bed. The walls were pale, anonymous, temporary. Much like the version of her story she had believed, she replayed the baker's words again and again. She loved that baby. Love had never been missing from her life, but she had unconsciously assumed abandonment meant absence of love. Now that assumption was unraveling. Her birth mother had been young and unsupported. Circumstances, not indifference, had shaped that decision. She realized how many quiet fears she had carried unknowingly. The fear of not being enough, the fear of being replaceable, the fear of being left without explanation. They had roots deeper than she understood. The narrative inside her began to shift, not dramatically, but steadily. She was not discarded. She had been surrendered to possibility. There is a difference. That night, she slept without clenching her jaw. It was the first time in weeks. Grief was still there, but softer. And beneath it, something new was forming. A fragile sense of peace. The next record she uncovered surprised her. Her birth mother had another child years later, a son. There was a name, an age, even a current city listed. Her heart began to race again. He would be in his late 40s now, old enough to have his own family, old enough to have lived an entire life without knowing she existed. She studied his photo on a public profile page. He had her eyes. The possibility felt overwhelming. If she reached out, everything could change. He might welcome her. He might reject her. He might not respond at all. She opened the blank message window. Her fingers hovered above the keys once more. How do you introduce yourself as a hidden chapter? How do you explain 51 years in a few sentences? Courage felt heavier this time. She closed the laptop gently, not out of surrender, but reflection. This step required more than curiosity. It required vulnerability, and she was almost ready. She opened the laptop before she could change her mind. The house was quiet, but her heart was not. The blank message box glowed against the dim room. This time, hesitation felt heavier than fear. She knew silence would no longer protect her. She began to type slowly. My name is... Then she paused and deleted it. She typed again, choosing honesty over perfection. She explained the document, the search, the connection. Her words were careful but real. She did not demand anything from him. She did not claim space she had not yet earned. She simply offered the truth of her existence, a sister who had just discovered she was one. Before pressing send, she reread every sentence. Her legal training wanted precision and control. But this was not a courtroom. This was a doorway between two unknown lives, and vulnerability had no guarantee. Her finger trembled as she clicked send. The message disappeared into the invisible world of signals and wires. There was no dramatic sound, no visible shift, just a quiet confirmation on the screen, and a woman who had finally chosen courage over fear. The reply came 3 days later. She had checked her inbox more times than she could count. Each notification had startled her breath, but when his name appeared, time seemed to slow. Her hands felt cold as she opened it. He had not written much, but what he wrote mattered. I had no idea, he began. He said he needed time to understand everything, yet he also said he was willing to talk. There was no rejection in his words, no accusation, just surprise and careful curiosity. He admitted he saw a resemblance in the photos she had attached. He had noticed the eyes too. She read the message again and again. Relief moved through her like warm light, not because everything was solved, but because the door had not been closed. It had been left open. For the first time since the attic, she smiled without forcing it. The world outside her window looked softer somehow. She was not standing alone at the edge anymore. Someone on the other side had answered, and that changed everything. They agreed to meet halfway between their cities, a quiet park with wide trees and wooden benches. She arrived early, her pulse loud in her ears. Every passing car made her straighten her posture. Then she saw him walking toward her. There was no cinematic music, no slow motion. Just two adults carrying complicated histories. When they stood face to face, silence wrapped around them. He smiled first, uncertain but genuine, and something inside her recognized him instantly. They spoke awkwardly at first. Childhood stories that did not overlap. Different holidays, different traditions, different parents, yet shared expressions appeared in their laughter. familiar gestures mirrored without effort. He told her about their birth mother. She had passed away a few years earlier. He described her strength, her struggles, her quiet resilience. Listening felt like receiving a missing chapter, not to replace her life, but to expand it. When they hugged goodbye, it was brief but real, not forced, not dramatic, just human. She walked back to her car feeling something new. Love had not divided her life, it had multiplied it. A week later, she returned to her mother's grave. This time, she carried no anger, only understanding. The sky was clear, sunlight resting gently on the stone. She felt different standing there. "I know you loved me," she said softly. The words did not tremble. She understood now that secrecy had been fear, not malice, a misguided attempt to protect her heart, an error born from love. She thought of the woman who gave birth to her, of impossible choices and silent sacrifices, to mothers, both imperfect, both human, both part of her. For years, she had believed identity was singular. One story, one origin, one truth. Now she understood it was layered, complex, interwoven, resilient. She was not broken between two worlds. As she left the cemetery, she felt lighter. Not because the past had changed, but because her relationship to it had. Forgiveness had created space inside her, and peace had quietly moved in. Back in her Boston office, she looked around differently. The shelves of law books still stood in neat rows. Her framed degrees still hung on the wall. But something inside her had expanded beyond titles. She was no longer defending only others. She began volunteering with a local adoption support group. At first, she simply listened. Women of different ages, sharing fragmented stories, fear of searching, fear of knowing, fear of reopening old wounds. When it was her turn to speak, her voice was calm. She did not present herself as a victim, nor as someone who had all the answers, only as someone who had chosen to look and discovered that truth can heal. She realized identity is not a fixed inheritance. It is an ongoing decision, a conversation between past and present, a space where love can expand instead of compete, a place where belonging is chosen. That night, she folded the adoption certificate carefully, not to hide it again, but to preserve it as part of her whole story. She turned off the light with a quiet smile. She was not half of anything, she was complete. If this story touched your heart, know that you are never alone in your questions. There is always room to rediscover who you are, no matter your age or your past. Thank you for walking this journey with us, and remember, it is never too late to begin again.